You're listening to Quantum Conversations with Karen Curry Parker. Join us as we explore new frontiers in consciousness, science, and evolution. And now here's your host, Karen Curry Parker.
When all else fails, or when we feel powerless, we're taught to get on our knees and pray. It's become commonplace to say to each other in times of need that we're sending each other love and light. But does sending love and light or prayer actually work? In a cynical, material world, we often scoff at the seemingly powerless act of prayer. We think the only way to change things, to make things better, is to do the physical work of the world, and that sending prayers is a way of opting out of doing the real work of change. But what if there's more to making the world a better place than moving the proverbial mud? What if prayer is more powerful than we realize? According to Lynne McTaggart, prayer, when done correctly, actually heals, changes lives, supports, nurtures, and transforms people. When individuals in a group focus their intention together on a single target, a powerful collective dynamic emerges that can heal long-standing conditions, mend fractured relationships, reduce violence, and even rekindle a sense of purpose in one's life. But the most amazing discovery of McTaggart's observations and experiments is that group intentions not only heal, but have a mirror effect, transforming the recipient, but also reflecting back on the sender. Please join me for an empowering quantum conversation with Lynne McTaggart, author of The Power of Eight, Harnessing the Miraculous Energies of a Small Group to Heal Others, Your Life, and the World. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Quantum Alignment Show. This is a special edition. I am Karen Curry Parker, and I'm really excited to have Lynne McTaggart here with us today. Lynne is an internationally renowned author of the book The Field, and I know many of you have read that, and The Intention Experiment. She's joining us today to talk about her new book, The Power of Eight. And we've had a whole wave of people taking photos of your book over the last few days on Facebook. She's going to talk about she's going to start with, Lynne, you call this an accidental discovery about the healing power of altruism. So tell us a little bit, let's start first with what is your accidental discovery? And then I have a whole list of questions for you about how we can use this information to help heal each other and even to heal the world.
Okay. Well, I had started out in 2007 wanting to test the power of intention. You know, we'd heard a lot about the law of attraction, and The Secret was a movie that was coming out. And I had a lot of awkward questions about all of this. I have a background as an investigative reporter. So I was the ultimate doubting Thomas about this. I had interviewed a lot of scientists for my book, The Field, who talked about the idea that thoughts are an actual something with the capacity to change physical matter. But I wanted to find out, okay, how far can we take this? Are we talking about, just shifting a quantum particle? Are we talking about curing cancer with our thoughts? So, and what happens when lots of people are doing the same thing at the same time, thinking the same thought at the same time? Does it magnify the effect? So I decided to put this to the ultimate test by setting up a thing called the Intention Experiment. And in my book of the same name, I invited my readers to take part in periodic experiments. I figured that I knew a lot of scientists in consciousness research, and I also had a lot of readers from The Field. It's in 30 languages. So I figured if I brought these two bits together, I'd have the biggest global laboratory in the world. So I did. And every so often, I'd ask my readers or an audience, if I was speaking somewhere, to send an intention to some well-controlled target. And we did everything from leaves and seeds, trying to make them grow faster and change little properties of them, to trying to purify water, lower violence in war-torn areas, and finally try to heal somebody of PTSD. So it really worked, which I was shocked by. I didn't think it was going to work that well, to be honest. I thought maybe we'd have some effects, but we had huge effects. Of the 30 experiments that we've measured to date, 26 have shown measurable, positive, mostly significant effects. So there's no drug out there that has that kind of effect. But around the time I started it, about after I'd run some experiments, 2008, I thought to myself, well, I ought to run a workshop about this. But how do you show people the power of intention in a weekend workshop? People can't manifest a new job. So I'm just kind of thinking out loud to my husband, and I'm saying, I don't know, maybe I'll just put them together in groups of 8 and we'll send healing intention. The group will send healing intention to a member of the group with a health challenge. And my husband, being a great headline writer, said, yeah, I love it, the power of 8. And so we started out in Chicago in 2008 with our first workshop. We put the audience into groups of 8. And I knew a lot about how to do intention. I'd studied with intention masters. I'd studied the science of intention. I distilled all of those practices into a simple program I called Powering Up. So I knew about how to do intention, but I didn't know about group intention. Are there any things you have to do? So I'm just telling them, well, let's get in a circle. Let's hold hands. You got to hold on to the same intention statement at the same time. It's got to be this. It's got to be that. I'm completely making it up as I go along. And so I do all of this, and I ask them to come in the next day and talk about their experiences. And I figure what they're going to say is it felt like getting my back rubbed. It was a nice little feel-good thing, like getting a facial. And that's not what happened. People stood up, we gave them the mic and turn, and they said things like this. I've had a migraine every day of my life for years and years and years, and my head feels completely normal today. Another one, I have terrible arthritis. I limp all the time and my knee feels completely normal. I'm walking normally. Another one, I had terrible IBS and my stomach feels normal. And on it went for an hour. I mean, a woman had cataracts and she said she was 80% better. And my husband and I just look at each other and are completely shocked. So not only was I shocked, I was pretty disbelieving. I thought, this was a placebo effect until it kept happening over and over and over and over with hundreds, now thousands of people. And not only the receivers, but the senders were also getting healed. I started to realize something is going on.
So let's talk about that, because that's a really, the whole finding of, okay, the circle of 8 and people getting healed, I think that's already a powerful piece. But the whole piece of the senders also getting healed. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, when I finally acknowledged that something was going on here, and it took me a long time, this is why it's taken me 10 years to publish this book, to really understand it, believe it, etc. I started looking into why. Why is this working? And I looked at lots of things. Brainwave studies and what goes on in a group effects, and of course intention. But one other piece was altruism, the whole power of getting off of yourself. And this came about by accident, because in one of the ways I wanted to study this was to put people in a master class where I would teach them for 6 weeks and then put them into small groups and observe them for an entire year, and have them report back to me every month on how they were doing with their health, their relationships, their life's purpose, their career, their finances. And most people, of the people of that 250 who were part of that group, who kept meeting in groups, 150 of them had, they were the number who stayed working in groups. And pretty much 100% of them had major life transformations. Wow. So that was amazing to me. And there were extraordinary things going on, everything from healing lifelong depression to 15 years worth of chronic fatigue, to amazing dream jobs and finances coming just when they needed them, and or extraordinary things happening all the time. Once in a while, there was a person who wasn't having NFX early on in the year. One of those was Andy. And Andy was trying to get a new job. She was just going through a divorce. She was trying to get a new job. She'd sold her gift store business. She couldn't get anything, no bites. And she was a, experienced marketing person and nothing. And so finally, after trying all kinds of things with her group, I finally said to her, Andy, just get off of yourself. Start intending for someone else. And I threw somebody else out who was a 15-year-old who tried to commit suicide after breaking up with his first serious girlfriend. He'd thrown himself off a 40-foot structure onto hard ground. And he broke everything. He had nerve damage, brain damage, etc. So we set up a 3-week healing vigil for Luke. Mm-hmm. And one of the people taking part was Andy. As soon as Andy started taking part with this thing with Luke, out of the blue, out of nowhere, she gets a call about a dream job. And that happened over and over and over again, enough for me to look into the science of altruism. And I found that altruism is like a bulletproof vest. People who do for other people in any way are healthier, happier, live longer in every regard. In fact, one big study looking at depression, using prayer to heal depression, they had volunteers, 400 people with depression, and they divided them into 2 groups. One half got the prayer and the other half did the praying. And afterward, a psychologist measured them with all kinds of psychometric tests to see if they'd improved. The people who got the praying did well. They improved, but not as much as the people who had done the praying for them.
Wow.
And that happens over and over and over again to demonstrate that altruism has hugely powerful effects on the immune system.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a minute, and we're getting a little bit of feedback, but I think we got it. So a couple of weeks ago, we had, I think, your friend Howard Martin here. And actually,
he is my dear friend.
He suggested that we bring you on, and he actually wanted an intention for you guys to have a debate. So Howard Martin is one of the founders and representatives of the Heart Math Institute. And of course, in Heart Math Institute, they talk about changing the world by becoming coherent, increasing heart coherence, and just maintaining sort of a general state of, we'll call it well-being. And that just by simply being in that place of well-being, we have the power to change the nature of the energy of the world. And you're saying it's really the intention, or at least I'm gathering, that the intention that we set, that it's clear, that it's precise, that we hold this intention, that we send light to water or plants or send intention to each other, that it's a little bit different than just staying in a state of well-being. Talk to me about your perspective on this, and why is there a difference between just being happy and coherent and relaxed, or versus having a clear intention and using your energy that way?
First of all, there's more than one way to skin a cat. The transcendental meditation people have demonstrated big positive effects in lowering violence, in having a critical mass of meditators, just meditating. So again, that's a passive practice. Howard and HeartMath have done amazing stuff with people and demonstrating that when people are in a space of love and compassion and appreciation, that radiates out to the world. And there's plenty of evidence demonstrating that there's some wonderful evidence with Harvard showing that if you're happy, you're more likely to have happy friends, not because you self-select happy people to be around, but because of the natural spread of happiness. Well, the same thing would happen with negative effects, negative in things like loneliness. You're more likely to have lonely friends. And also, I would assume, appreciation. If you're in a state of appreciation and gratitude, you're more likely to radiate that out. There's a natural ripple effect in the world. So that's my take on that. I think with our intentions, what we have found, I'm not just sort of making this one up. We've looked at this with all of those experiments, and we've tried it with general intentions, and they don't work. We once sent love to water, and we had no effect. We had no effect in changing, making a positive change of pH. When we sent an intention to move the pH by at least 1 unit, we did. So with us, we found over and over again, a very specific intention works. And that's also the state in the laboratory. The more specific, the better. But remember, too, we've had brainwave studies looking at what happens to the brain during these Power of Eight groups. And we find something very, very different from meditation. Not better, not worse, just different. What we've discovered is that when people do this collective intention together, first of all, I know from intention masters, the kind of people like a Qigong master who can throw somebody across the room with their thoughts, they don't have a quiet meditative state or a quiet state like heart math. They have a very energized, highly focused mind, propelling that person. That's razor sharp intention. And we found the same thing that happens with intention. When you're in a group, something very different happens in your brain. It turns off all of the parts of the brain that make you feel separate. The parts of the brain, like the parietal lobes, that make us feel, that tell us where we end and the rest of the world begins. They're all part of separation. It also turns down a lot of the executive portions of the brain involved with worry, doubt, and negativity. So the people that are doing these kinds of intentions in small groups resemble, and it's almost identical brainwave signatures to Sufi masters during chanting or Buddhist monks in ecstatic prayer, people who are experiencing a state of ecstatic oneness. So there are amazing effects that happen with heart math. There are amazing effects that happen with meditation. This is something different, and it has to do really with the connection, the oneness one feels in that group.
Beautiful. So I want to continue this a little bit differently. We also had Dr. Amit Goswami here last year, and Dr. Goswami talked about studies with prayer, and he told us that when you get to a certain critical mass in these studies, part of the reason why these larger prayer studies didn't work was because there's too much tangled hierarchy when you get a whole bunch of people holding an intention. So you say 8. Why 8? And is there any variability on those numbers?
Okay, first of all, on the large prayer studies, which I looked at in great detail in the intention experiment, there were terrible study design issues with all of the major prayer studies. There are about 150 prayer studies that have demonstrated positive effects, including the one I talked about with depression. That was run by a psychologist and a priest. The big scale studies, the one from Harvard, et cetera, what they did was, number one, they had people pray who were from different denominations to people who weren't necessarily religious in any way, and also people were told they might get prayer, they might not. That's pretty devastating. It's also worrying for people who don't necessarily believe in prayer. They might think, oh gosh, there's nothing more they can do for me. All they can do is pray for me. And finally, they prayed by using their first name only. That's like me trying to phone you and only using the first 3 digits of your phone number. How many Bobs are there in the world? So there were so many aspects of study design that I would really quarrel with, and many others have too. So I don't think they prove anything about anything. Also, prayer, although we call it prayer, this intention work is a little different. It's not asking a supreme being to do something. Usually people in prayer will say, thy will be done, or the best possible outcome or something. In other words, you decide, God. What we're doing with intention is we're asking the universe, we're requesting something very specific. So it's a little different. And in terms of numbers, it has nothing to do with those people were praying remotely. Our people were, and they were praying for different people. Our people are all sending an intention for the same thing. And that, I think, is the most powerful element of it. You become one mind, and that becomes a coherent, I won't use the term coherence because that's really heart math uses it, and I don't want to confuse things. But you become one single entity. And that really is part of that connection. We found it with the big intention experiments too. I survey people who get involved with all of my intention experiments, and I have done since 2008. And the first time we did a peace intention experiment for Sri Lanka at that time, I surveyed them and I got back thousands of answers. I just asked them how it was for them. And they said things like, I felt like I was part of a higher network. I was feeling tingling up and down my arms. I was sobbing uncontrollably. I mean, we had thousands of answers very similar to this. I felt like I was part of the tractor beam in Star Trek. You know, there were just all kinds of amazing discussions of feeling this extraordinary connective, cohesive energy. And then they had amazing rebound effects in their lives, where a mirror effect, essentially, where their lives became more peaceful. They all described, 40% described being in love with everyone they come in contact with. People were making up with estranged relatives and family. They were connecting with better with their coworkers, even not so nice bosses. They were hugging strangers, basically. And their lives went on to be more peaceful. So I think there's something really powerful about the group effect itself that you can't really say is analogous to some of those other situations.
So I want to ground this and really give people a way to use this as a tool. So I'm going to ground it in an example, and let's play with this for a minute. A couple of weeks ago, we had a terrible shooting in the United States, another school shooting in the United States. And I want to be really clear, as I'm saying, just for everybody's sake, every time I bring this up, I'm not talking about gun control or any policies around guns. I'm talking about healing. So there was a meme that was going around that was sort of making light of the phrase sending love and light. And certainly I'm, again, also saying, of course, we have to also take physical action. We're materialized in the third dimensional world. But there is this place of feeling like, I want to make a difference in this situation. It's hurting my heart. I know that my listeners, have this experience. This is hurting my heart. I want to do something, and I can't write legislation, or I can't do anything. And I want to send love and light to these kids. How do we do that in a way that is scientifically valid and potentially has the possibility of actually supporting and helping people heal?
Okay, well, first of all, I'm going to answer that by saying I think we all should study those 17-year-olds who took charge of this whole situation afterward. I've been watching them closely, and I am stunned, amazed, and just overwhelmed by how powerful they are. First of all, within 10 days of that shooting, Cameron Kasky, Emma Gonzalez, and the third guy who's been around and in the news a lot, who is a budding journalist, had organized a march that will be countrywide on March 24th, had met with Florida legislators, had cornered Marco Rubio to say about the NRA payments, had done all of these things, had dealt with the press, knew how to deal with the news cycle, had created a website, had created merchandise already to fund their march, had received donations of millions of dollars from celebrities. I mean, they were extraordinary. Yes. They were powerful, and they were inclusive. What they did that was so brilliant was they said, we're not against gun ownership. One of them said, my dad has a gun. I don't want to take guns away from him. But what I want to do is prevent a mentally disturbed underage person or any kind of person from walking into a school with a semi-automatic and being able to blow away the students. And as a result of the way they handled it, I don't know if you saw this, but they started to create another kind of viral thing, which was because their thing went viral, and then a guy who had an AR-15 sits there in front of YouTube and talks about how he doesn't want to have another gun like this, do something like this, turns around, gets his buzzsaw out and saws the thing in half, whereupon there's become a whole bunch of other people doing the same thing who are all gun owners. So there was something where they were only talking about corruption, the NRA and the corruption, not people's right to own a gun, but sensible gun ownership. And they were demonizing the people who were corrupt and paying off politicians, et cetera. So there was a powerful thing. I love the idea of making this an inclusive thing for both people involved with gun ownership and people involved with gun control, and letting them see that everybody wants the same thing, which is not to have this ever happen again. Mm-hmm. And when we take the political people out of it, it's powerful. So I would talk about doing intentions for unifying people, and unifying people to stand together for this, to create incredible pressure on politicians to not allow the politicians and the corrupt lobbyists to divide us again, and to make sure that we are all working for responsible gun ownership.
So would it serve then to consciously then set up a group intention experiment, so to speak, where we all say, okay, at this time we're going to hold this intention and this is what we're going to...
Well, yeah, and that's what we're doing. I mean, we have talked about, we've had a number of people ask us to do this, and I've done periodic big experiments that are informal, and I would do that too. I've written about this and I've talked about it quite a lot, and I'd like to just, run one. And also, people, doesn't have to be with me. People can also set up their little groups of 8 and send that out. I would really encourage that, with Power of 8 groups, you can send an intention for someone with a condition inside the group. You can send an intention for someone with a condition outside the group. You can send an intention for anything, for someone inside the group, for a situation outside the group, for a person outside the group, whether it's their finances, it's a world problem. We did a big intention for California during all of those fires. Mm-hmm. And so you can do any kind of thing like that. That's the beauty of a Power of 8, just being specific. That's the only thing that matters, and all holding the thought at the same time.
So I have a couple of questions that are coming up in our chat, because we have people watching on our chat as well. So one of the questions is, why 8? Is there any other number?
8 is a Goldilocks number. To be perfectly honest, it was me pulling it out of a hat when I was talking to my husband, just saying, I don't know, let's put them in groups of 8 or something. It wasn't sacred geometry. It wasn't, it's lovely. 8 is the sign of infinity, sideways. All of those things, but it was pure accident. What we have discovered is 8 is a Goldilocks number. It's kind of an ideal number, but it's not the only thing that works. Your group will work with 7, it'll work with 9, it'll work with 10. I think it needs to be more than 5 and less than 12, or 12 or less. Otherwise, it gets a little unwieldy.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. And then the next question was, does the group have to come together at the same time, even when they're not in the same locality?
Doesn't have to be in the same locality. When I talked about that masterclass with all of the people working together, once I put them into groups, they weren't in the same physical location. They were meeting on Skype or Google Hangouts or Zoom. And many of them have continued to meet for several years, and they have never physically met each other. Oh, wow. Nevertheless, these people have become their intention family. They are there for each other. I mean, I've got one guy, Mitchell, and he's got very friendly with Robert. And Mitchell and Robert write each other every couple of days. And when Mitchell once said, I had insomnia, Robert says, don't worry, I knew it. Last night I stayed up and I had you covered. And, it's that kind of thing that goes on all the time. So you never have to physically meet. Remember our intention experiments? People aren't in the same room. They are isolated in front of their computer screen, and they're still feeling these effects. Same thing with our people on Skype. I'm running a master class now where I put people into groups right on my call. We put them into groups right on the call, and people feel amazing effects, have amazing experiences, and they've never met these people before, and they're getting into groups for the first time. So you don't have to be in the same physical place.
So I have two little spin-offs in that question, and then I know we want to talk a little bit about some of the other things that you're up to. The first spin-off is, these are people that are in different locations. Do they have to also do it at the same time?
That's really important. Yeah. It's because that's part of feeling that that coherence as a group, that connection as a group. So yes, I think that's one really important thing. What we try to do is to hook people up via time zones.
So, and then there's a bubbling of sort of correlated comments here that is, there are people who are saying, oh, but what about negative intentions? Can you gather together in a group and send negative intentions to people too?
Sadly, intention doesn't have a morality. I mean, there's a long history of indigenous populations using voodoo and hexes and all of that. That's negative intention. And Qigong masters will use something like destroying mind, as it's called, to harm an opponent. And there have been many studies, this is all in my book, The Intention Experiment, showing that negative intention through a Qigong master, can retard plant growth, and positive intention can encourage it. And there have been many studies with people who are just volunteers who aren't Qigong masters that show that negative intention works just as well as positive intention. There are a lot of techniques for protecting yourself, and that I covered in the intention experiment, et cetera, and they're kind of too long to go into. But the most powerful thing to understand is that most people, certainly groups, don't gather together to create harm, and also aren't usually as focused enough as you need to be. So yes, there is the power of negative intention, but I think what's really important is to not worry about that so much, and to just worry about or concern yourself with using a group for powerful positive effects and watching what happens.
Well, it seems to me too, if the mirror effect works in the positive direction, that maybe if you go the negative direction, it might bounce back at you too in that direction.
It could do. I mean, there's, listen, it does work. Look at Hitler. He had a pretty big intention, and it worked for a while. But I think what's really important is you do need a highly focused mind to be really successful with intention. And a lot of people who are running around with that kind of negativity aren't very focused.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that sparked off a whole. So, okay, we're going to shift gears, everybody. Just let's bring us back to the positive part. And we're going to all use our intentions for good, and we're not going to worry about the Ku Klux Klan or all these other people. We're just going to use the power of intention in a unified, conscious way together, and use our good intentions as our bulletproof shield. Is that what you call it? Our bulletproof shield. So I want to make sure that people can learn more about your work. And I know a lot of people are wanting to know, how can I get into a group? So first of all, just a quick reminder, you guys, if I can do this, The Power of Eight is the book. It is available on Amazon and any other big retail book outlet. And you can get it this way. If you want to read it now, you can get it on your Kindle. It's just a powerful, powerful book. I posted last night about it, and all my people on Facebook were posting pictures that they were all reading it in bed last night too.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
And if people want to learn more about you, Lynne, how can they, and if they want to hook up with a Power of Eight group, tell us a little bit about how they can do that.
Okay, sure. First of all, to find out more about me, it's lynnmctaggart.com, and that's Lynn with an E, and McTaggart is A-R-T. I also have a section of my website, lynnmctaggart.com/forum, where we have created a whole section for people to set up groups themselves. And so people from all over the world are setting up groups together in their own time zones. So what happens is somebody will put up a notice saying, I want to do one in the UK. So anybody in the same, Greenwich Mean Time who want to join me, or I'm in California, anybody else in Pacific Time who wants to join me, and then lots of other people will write them, and then they become a group. So you can join a group by just logging on there, or you can create a group and just ask others to join. And we've got them, as I say, hundreds of them all over the world. And so what happens is once they make that connection, then they create a Skype group or a Zoom link or something like that, and they start meeting. So it's that simple. If you don't have 7 other people to meet physically near you, you can set this up that way. Also, people are setting up physical groups on that forum page too, saying, I'm in the Denver area. I know we've got one here in where I live in London, where my woman at my local health shop told me, we've just set up a group of 8 and I drive a half an hour to meet them every week. So you can do either one there. And you can also work intensely with me. I do one masterclass a year, which is where I put people into groups. I train them. We put people into groups of 8, and then we monitor them all year long and work with them all year long. That's already started for this year. But I have another thing that I do once a year, which is a retreat in some wonderful place. And the wonderful place we have this year is Tuscany, September 29th to October 6th. And we're going to be staying in this gorgeous villa with a pool and a spa. And what happens is we do intensive work on intention and things in the morning with just a select group of 30. And then in the afternoons, we go to Florence, Siena, San Gimignano, the Chianti Trail, and just enjoy the villa and Italian foods. So for anybody interested in that, they need to go to www.globalj.org. It's also on my website under events, but globalj.org has all the information about it.
That sounds amazing. With some of my favorite places in the world. So very nice. So Lynne, thank you so much for your incredible work and the wisdom and the knowledge that you keep sharing with us. Thank you for sharing your afternoon with us here and being with us. And I am so grateful for all that you've shared with us. I'm inspired. I'm just keep thinking in my head all last night. I was like, who am I going to call for my 8? So,
I know.
go ahead.
And here's the great thing about it. This is the thing. And I think this is what the big takeaway message for me was. And as I say, I was the biggest doubting Thomas of all. Mm-hmm. I now am not. I'm now what I like to say a reluctant apostle of the miracle and magic of groups, because what we found, and we had a university do these brainwave studies. Life University, largest chiropractic university in the world, mm-hmm. did a series of brainwave studies on these Power of 8 groups and demonstrated this extraordinary effect that was like a Sufi master. But what's so powerful about these groups is you don't need years of disciplined practice. You don't need hours of priming to get into these, what is essentially a mystical state. All you need is a group and watch what happens. So you don't need ayahuasca, you don't need sweat lodges, you just need a group. And honestly, any group with a heartfelt desire to come together as a Power of 8 group. And you'll find how powerful it is to change your life and the lives of everyone in the group and outside too.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Lynne McTaggart. And thank you all for joining us. Thank you, David, for manning the sound booth. Thank you, Cindy, as always, for holding everything together. And I'm excited. I've got 6 on my list so far. I got one more.
Great. Let me know what happens. I'm still amazed. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
We live in an extraordinary time when science now validates what our grandmothers and generations of ancient mystics intuitively knew in their hearts. Our advances in our understanding of consciousness is showing us that our intentions and our prayers orchestrate the creation of limitless possibilities and can empower us to deliberately create extraordinary results by simply harnessing the power of our hearts and minds together. I find it profound and reassuring that we get the greatest results with prayer when we combine our energies around a single intention, and that the more we add the energy and intentions of our hearts and minds together, the greater impact we have on the outcome. It's easy, in the face of a world that seems to be in a terrible state of chaos and flux sometimes, to feel powerless, to feel the pull of tragedy on our hearts and to not know what to do. Lynne McTaggart's work reassures us that our hearts and our prayers do indeed make a change in the world. But I also think it's vital to note that the practice of prayer or holding an intention in the way that Lynne researched isn't random whisperings that we do alone. Prayer is a conscious, intentional act that works best when we set protocols and that stems from a conscious and vital, unified point of contact between ourselves. We have to plan to pray together, to hold intentions together as a practiced, conscious, deliberate way of working in the world. When we deliberately harness the power of our hearts and minds together, we can create miraculous changes, perhaps beyond what we can do by simply working the clay of the world with our labor and effort. We help each other, we heal each other, and ultimately, we also heal ourselves. If you'd like to learn more about how to turn on your power to heal the world and be who you came here to be, please visit my website, www.quantumalignmentsystem.com. While you're there, you can get your free human design chart and discover more about how magnificent you truly are. I'm Karen Curry Parker, and I'm sending you my prayers and intentions that you continue to discover the power of the truth of who you are, and that you harness your innate creative capacity with the creativity of your divine siblings, and that we keep working together to make this world the full expression of the joy, love, and abundance that we know is possible. Here's to you and the power of your heart.
Thanks for listening to Quantum Conversations with Karen Curry Parker. For more information, visit joyfulmission.com.